Hello, world. Frida Reba Darcy and Patricia O'Connor here today. It's a beautiful Sunday in Alameda, California, and I would like to do a few minutes. This won't be a very long video, but I'd like to talk about design and how it applies to bonsai. And you know, it can also it's kind of like one of the things that draws us to bonsai. We see the beauty of the trees, but there you go, lured her from the wild. The beauty of the trees, but also we sometimes sit back and watch while other people go at a tree with no abandonment. You know, they'll go in there and bend something or break something over. By break it over, I don't mean break necessarily. I mean, they'll bend it over. And how did they know they could do that? And they'll just go at it with confidence. Or they'll just start talking about styling a tree, or maybe not a lot of talking. Then they just walk over and just start cutting stuff. And you think to yourself, if I stared at that tree for a month, I would not have thought to do that. How did they know to do that? Where does that even come from? And how do you learn to do that the first time to where you would know to do that the dozens of times that it must have? So there's just some of that, and it can be intimidating. You think to yourself, I'll never be able to do that. You know, you watch somebody, you know, like Ryan Neal or something, like, where the hell does that even come from? Well, there is such thing as a knack. Certain people do have a certain knack for design, but also nobody's perfect. When it comes to design, a lot of times we kind of learn in stages. And I'm just going to go with personal experience here. As a human being, I'm kind of drawn towards proportions, and since I have 2 feet, 2 hands, and 2 eyes, and 2 ears, I'm kind of like symmetry is a pretty cool thing, you know? And it's not just me, but in nature, we kind of look at youth is symmetrical. Age is asymmetrical. A seed comes out of the ground, it shoots a branch over here, it shoots a branch over there, and that's symmetrical. And that grows up, and then it puts one over here and puts one over there, and it continues to go up and do that and do that and do that. And pretty soon, you've got a specimen of something that's young and vital and producing all the energy, and it's green and it's hardy, and it's showing that life has had very little impact on it. But then what would you flash forward, 1,000 years, and the tree will have had its top knocked off of it a couple of times by lightning bolts or other trees falling in its vicinity, or fires that burn the top of the tree out. And what we associate then, age and beauty, is asymmetry. So when we get into bonsai, maybe we see something and we think it's the perfect bonsai material, and we take it home and look at it. Maybe we dug it up, or we dug it out of the bin at the nursery, and we bring it home, and then maybe we go and start trying to find where other people have had a tree like that and what they did with it, only to discover that they cut the parts you like off every single time. Maybe you thought bar branches were cool because they were so symmetrical, and it was cool that nature thought to do that, and then one of the first things that you learn is that we tend to get rid of as many straight lines as we can a lot of times. Now, having said that, I'm framed dead up on 3 straight lines, and the only time I've ever hardly wired my bald cypresses was to even make them straighter. There are going to be 3 formal uprights, so they will take that stereotypical Christmas tree kind of triangular shape. Those will be my three tributes to the tried and true. As per this is totally the other end of the spectrum. This is the Yamadori tree. It has some features to it that make it less believable as a large tree. Whereas this, now we've got quite a bit of fattening up on this tree before those little leaders. But as far as the height and the width, we're kind of in there. When this stuff fattens up, we'll be pulling up to the dock here in a couple of years, and with some trimming, that'll be a nice looking balance and everything. Where our balance will come from here is in that we're going to go this way, and then we're going to go this way, and then we're going to go this way. And instead of having a balance this way, we're going to have a balance by one over here and one over here. And that's just kind of how you get a feel for something that doesn't say, I'm in perfect balance in a totally artificial way, yet at the same time gives you the feel of having balance. Now, with those needles being that long, this is not going to look like a convincing bonsai tree for several years until one of several different measures would have to be taken to reduce that needle size. Do I see a design tree here yet? Years ahead of when I'm going to come pulling up to the top to the dock with a design aesthetic? No, and it doesn't work that way for me. It works that way for people like Ryan Neal, and it works that way for others. But that's because they've done everything 1,000 times. They know what happens when their first idea was to do this, and then 2 years later, something becomes of it. A lot of what I've done here is, excuse me, a lot of what I've done here is sort of what you do when you have a canyon tree or you have a Yamadori. Everything is sprawled out in every direction, really long way. A lot of sprigs on the end of branches. So what you find you're having to do with that is fold everything up, and it's not always 100% convincing. But what you do by wiring it and bringing everything in tighter is you're inducing the tree to back bud, and back buds are going to, hopefully, if we started seeing back buds back here on these branches, then at some point our tree becomes this much shorter. We try to promote the buds further back. So that's also to say that if we decide that we're going to graft things, do I have to know if I'm going to graft this tree with smaller foliage? Do I have to have my design in mind before I ever start grafting this thing? Because I'm going to be grafting this thing 2 years before we even pull up to anything close to a final design concept. Do I have to know all of that before I can start? No. As a matter of fact, I don't. There are some rules about grafting, not so much rules that dictate your success, but there are some rules about where to place your grafts that tell us where to go to give us the optimum amount of options when we transfer later to our design. And basically what that says is that on a pine tree, on almost all varieties of pine tree with just a couple of exceptions, that you're not going to get a graft to start wherever there is bark. So we would look for areas that is just where the tree transitions from bark to knot, and go as far back as you can when you're a layer that you can do a graft in, and put a graft there and possibly put one on the other side of that same branch in the same place or close to thereabout. So that's how you would cover your bed. You automatically bring every graft you make as far back on that branch as you can before the plating over of bark starts. And that tells you that, because what you're going to want to do with these is take advantage of the fact that you get to place your bud. So place your buds somewhere on a layer where it is not plated over. All of a sudden, I would have buds here. All of a sudden, I would have buds back here. And at some point, when those take off, these branches would go by the wayside because we pulled the tree back. And with those choices, we then could style a tree based on the same thing that you would always see everybody else doing: the fundamentals, the building of pads, and just you are a step back and a 3 foot look at the pads that you've started laying out and framing out, and seeing what works and what doesn't, and then step back in, make your cuts, and bam, you look like a very confident. Now, do that a dozen times, and you'll be able to walk up to a tree with some pruners and start lopping off stuff that you know isn't going to help you later. And people will look at you in awe and wonder at how it is that you are so giftedly talented that you know that you can do that. Also, you have to watch that, because sometimes some of your choices, your first league choices, aren't around come design day because they didn't live or whatever. And that thing you didn't cut, that bar branch that you resisted until you were through wiring everything, might mean that you end up using the branch that you would have cut off because the other one didn't make it. So just little ideas like that. But no, you don't have to see a tree and always know exactly what the right thing to do with it is. I mean, that looks like an octopus. Yes, it does. That's because it was, as a Yamadori tree, those are long branches with tufts on the end of them. And the idea would be to get that to back bud, and then as we get it to back bud, we prune back some of that stuff. Another design concept that you're supposed to have in the back of your mind is the tree will have spent so much time growing a trunk. So all of these branches that cut in front of the trunk, zigzagging, they're hiding the part that the tree went and spent so much time invested in making. That should be the part we show off. So the more that we can show off the branches without having them zigzag in front of the main feature, the better. So that's just, in other words, and that's not some big bold move. That's just a rule of thumb to keep in the back of your head. If that actually helps your tree, go with it. If it doesn't help your tree, go against it. The rules are also made to be broken, but they can help you out a lot. And that's kind of, knowing that about buds means that I don't have to worry about having a final design in mind when it comes time for me to make cuts on this tree. I'll automatically know to go back as far as I can go back on the layer where I can slice that down to the cambium without having to saw through bark to do it, because those will never be successful. That tells me where to put the buds. And once those take hold, 18 months from now, when we start transitioning the foliage back, that means we will be able to shorten our tree and pull that tree back in by that much, and that gives us more control. We aren't trying to overcome some things that a great tree grown in the wild gave us, as much as we've just kind of sidestepped them and been able to go our own way. To that end, that's kind of some of the design ideas, just to, offhand. Whenever you look at something and you see somebody that just goes through and goes, oh, kluk, 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 and then this is our tree right here. That's, that comes from having done that tens and tens and tens of times. And whenever we start watching, before I started making bonsai videos, I started watching bonsai videos. I would just burn through bonsai videos watching them. And there were some channels that I watched in the early goings that I don't watch as much now. Sometimes I maybe they are working on specimens of trees that I am not as interested in. So I've kind of picked up what I thought in kind of like sort of gravity. But one thing in a little background for this video, I went back to somebody that I used to see a lot, and it was called Bonsai Love, and her videos are out of Singapore, and there's never any dialogue. It usually just has music playing in the background, and you will see trees that are like more often than not, she starts with nursery stock, but a lot of times it's big nursery stock. And whenever it comes time to watch somebody do raffia, she'll do a lot of raffia. And then she'll take some trunk that is half the diameter of her arm and put some hellacious hoop bend in it after she's wired it to the max. And I had gotten away from her videos, and that was a mistake. Not only was that a mistake for me, but I would say that watching what she did with big trees inspired me to, as soon as I felt like I was capable of getting away with it, what I started doing with littler trees was a little bit of a reflection of what I saw her, and to some extent Kimmy at Kimmy Bonsai. But this woman with this other video that I'm talking about, I'll leave a link in this video to her work. She has a couple of hundred videos out. Her whenever her trees are in bonsai pots, they always look like the cheaper, bonsai factory quality pots. It's not about the quality of pots. It's about her walking up to a piece of material that is just box stock and going to town on it and making something really artistic. And it is a great teaching aid, and it is a wonderful aid, also like a teaching tool to show you when people say to you that everything is capable of being decent material. She gives great examples of how that is true. She'll start with something that you'll think that will never be anything, and then she'll cut off enough of it to where you think, and even less so now, and that just means she's getting warmed up. So it opens up your eyes to possibilities, to see people who work that quickly and that assuredly over what they cut off and what they move and how vigorously and with confidence they wrap huge wire around things, and how they go through and shape them. And you just watch somebody like that, and the way her hands move and the speed and the confidence, that you're looking at 10,000 hours of bonsai experience. I mean, don't know her name, just know that the name of the videos are Bonsai Love, and it's always almost always the same person, and almost always starts with some fairly stock looking nursery grade material, and almost always makes stunning trees that are quite often very drastically bent. So when it comes to design, don't get intimidated by the more impressed you are with other people's stuff, the hungrier you're going to be to learn how to do moves like that yourself. And bonsai is so much fun to learn. I mean, it's not like trying to learn to be a lawyer or something, or a mathematician. That homework would, on its best day, would still bite. But bonsai is so much fun to learn, and the design aesthetic end of it especially so. And whenever you do something and you have it come out right, that is especially pleasing. So, and it doesn't have to be 100% to give you 100% bonsai joy. I've said a million times, I derive 100% bonsai joy out of these 3 pre-bonsai cypress trees. And we're probably 5 years, maybe maybe 5 years. They would grow faster if they were in a hotter climate, but we live in paradise, so that's kind of, the offshoot of that is I don't have an AC. I don't have an air conditioner, but most of the time I don't need one. But then here, this is a beautiful hunk of wood and a rather old Yamadori that has a cool history that I'll never even know about before we met. But is it a convincing little tree? No, but it doesn't have to be convincing in a lot of ways. It's already earned its right in that it's a Yamadori that's been here longer than I have. So what will be convincing is what we do with it next and over there, and I don't have to think of all of that in one day. Now here's something else. Sometimes, like what I was saying earlier, your design aesthetic, when you get through, you're like, yeah, that looks just like a perfect cross there. And somebody else goes, yeah, that's called a bar branch, and you want to cut one of those too. But then other things, you see a lot of what I did here was I pulled stuff down. I pulled a lot of stuff down. When I got this tree, this was up here. And a lot of this stuff would have been up here. And what I've done is pull everything down. To me, that's a lot more pleasing. That may not like being pulled down. That may not like being pulled down. This felt like it was weaker than the other stuff. Maybe I put it in better light and it'll be happier. Or maybe it was going, I was already weak and you just pulled me down even further out of that apical dominant part of the tree, and now I'm going to die on you. So sometimes your design ideas that are based on aesthetics can be your undoing. I think this tree is pretty happy with some of the stuff we did there. I think some of the other trees are pretty happy with the stuff they did. I have to wait and see how some of these little cascades are gonna turn out when their head is actually that far down. That's the other side to the design, is at the end of the day, what will that do to us? And that's kind of why these are experiments, and I'm not experimenting on 100-year-old trees. But I don't think I've got a long way to learn when it comes to putting spirals and pretzels in trees. I think we've done this about 10, 20, 30 times now. And to some extent, I would say we kind of have that down. We're learning about clip and grow, but we're also learning about Cheerios and tight little bends and tight little wraps around trees. And I'm getting a feel for what my design aesthetic is, and that plus time will tell me what of this that I actually get away with and what of this were big mistakes. And I can do two more things. I can watch other people's show. I can try to navigate myself towards other people's interpretation of what they've done in trees that are like this and see how that turns out. And I can also wait and see. So learn from other people's triumphs and learn from other people's mistakes. And also give it a minute and see what happens. So that's our little idea about design. The main thing is when you see people doing cool stuff and you don't feel like, and you think, oh my God, how will I ever? You will. If you want to, if that's your priority, you will. That's all, one little tip at a time. A lot of what you think is a million decisions is a half a dozen little turns of phrase that you fall back on, like no 3 branches, no inward branches, no down. Once you kind of go through your little quick checklist, you don't really have a whole lot of styling choices that are just like, you don't have so many that you can't pick one and go with it. So, and that's the way And that's the way this is always going to be. Like and subscribe if you guys haven't already. I appreciate you. Frida appreciates you. And thank you so much for watching.